Hey there, if you've been following American news or politics at all over the last few weeks and months, then you'll likely know the result of the US elections. And while the result didn't necessarily surprise me, what continues to surprise me is how divided the world seems to be over the future prospects of America and the West as a whole. Now, on the one hand, this is true with every general election, as you have roughly half the country disappointed with the result, but in this case, things seem to be even more amplified, and that is likely due to the divisive nature of both candidates. So rather than delving into the specifics behind this particular result, instead I want to take a step back and look with a psychological lens over why some people have a liberal mindset, some have a conservative mindset, and what are the moral underpinnings behind these beliefs. By the end of this video, you'll have a much better idea what makes someone conservative, what makes someone liberal and progressive, and how this correlates with their specific worldview. And then from this, we can extract the specific moral foundations, the specific ideas about the future, and why one side often feels deflated at a particular election result, and the other side often feels enthusiastic or hopeful about the future. Now, the first thing to know about moral psychology is how it relates to personality. If you've been following this channel for a while, then you'll know I've just completed a video series on personality and the specific personality traits from the Big Five model. In this series, I mentioned how certain traits like conscientiousness tends to correlate with conservatism, and other traits like openness tends to correlate with having a liberal mindset. So definitely check out those videos if you're interested, but downstream from personality is your moral foundations. And like I said, these correlate on some level with personality, but they do exist on a layer below. Now we're going to break down our moral principles into 6 different foundations, and like I said, these are downstream from personality, but at the same time, we often like to think that our particular political beliefs are based on evidence and solid logic and reasoning, but actually these stem from our intuition, which is based on our personality, and from our intuition we form our moral foundations, and these moral foundations form our particular worldview and our specific political beliefs. Like I said, we like to think that our political beliefs stem from logic and reasoning, but actually the logic and reasoning comes later. Once we've formed our particular beliefs based on the things that I've just mentioned, like your intuition and your moral foundations, it's actually the reasoning that then goes on to justify the things that we already feel and believe. Jonathan Haidt calls this, intuition comes first, strategic reasoning comes second. So what are the 6 moral foundations? Well, the first one is the care-harm foundation, and this foundation is related to our ability to feel and dislike the pain of others. It underpins virtues like kindness and compassion. The second one is the fairness-cheating foundation, and this involves ideas such as justice, rights, and autonomy. It supports virtues like honesty and trustworthiness. The third one is loyalty/betrayal, and this foundation is all about our tribal nature and allegiance to groups. It supports virtues like patriotism and self-sacrifice for the group. The fourth one is authority/subversion. This concerns social order and respect for tradition and legitimate authority. It underlies virtues such as obedience and respect. The fifth one is sanctity/degradation. This foundation relates to the psychology of disgust and contamination. It supports virtues like purity and temperance. And the sixth and final one is liberty/oppression. This is all about the feelings of reactance and resentment people feel towards those who dominate them and restrict their liberty. It underpins virtues like freedom and self-determination. Now, how this relates to your specific worldview and your political orientation is that liberals tend to disproportionately favour 2 or 3 of those 6, certainly 2, but 3 to some extent, whereas conservatives tend to value all 6 of the moral foundations more evenly. They do value them slightly less than liberals do with their 2 priorities. So the first moral foundation that liberals and progressives tend to value much more highly is the care-harm foundation, and that's why they have a particular orientation towards compassion, empathy, and trying to equalize things such as the economy, people's rights, and so on. So when it comes to the second of these moral foundations, which is the fairness-cheating one, what is quite interesting is how there is a divergence between the worldview of someone on the left and the right, even though they still fall under this particular foundation. So for example, what matters most from a fairness and cheating perspective to someone on the left is equality, whereas someone on the right, they care more about proportionality. And what this means in principle is that for someone who's politically orientated towards the left, they're assessing the world based on equality. So when you see someone in a position of power or someone who's got disproportionate wealth relative to everyone else, then this triggers their fairness cheating foundation, and there's some kind of injustice that goes along with that. Whereas for someone who leans politically to the right, what matters more than overall and absolute equality is that people are rewarded based on their inputs and how hard they work. In other words, fairness to a conservative person is being rewarded in proportion to your total contribution, even if this guarantees unequal outcomes. Like I said, out of the 6 moral foundations, it's these 2 in particular that conservatives and liberals somewhat agree on. Now, they do diverge slightly when it comes to the fairness and cheating one, but by far the biggest differences between someone who leans left and someone who leans right is that someone who leans right values the other 4 much more highly, whereas someone who leans left doesn't really value these, or at least the other 2 take far greater precedence over the other 4 and even override them. The next thing worth noting when it comes to your own political beliefs is that they tend to be amplified not only by your own reasoning, but also your own social groups. And this is what leads to something called in-group, out-group behavior, because someone who is considered to be within your tribe tends to amplify your own beliefs, and you often, just by being part of a group, optimize for consensus rather than truth, because it's more important to be accepted and appreciated within your group or tribe than it is to be correct about something in the real world. This all comes from the fact that humans have evolved to live in groups, leading to strong in-group favoritism and out-group skepticism. And in-group favoritism is when people are inclined to prefer and prioritize the needs of those within their own group, which can be based on nationality, religion, political affiliation, or any shared identity. Whereas out-group derogation, there is a tendency to view those outside one's group with suspicion or hostility, which can lead to prejudice and conflict. This tribal mentality is amplified in politics and religion, where group identities are strongly felt, and this can lead to polarization and conflict. In the modern world, this is even more true because of technology and what is called echo chambers. When we're surrounded by a bunch of people either in the real world or particularly online that share similar worldviews, then these worldviews get amplified and alternative worldviews tend to be pushed aside. So you're only surrounded by and immersed in people who agree with you, and therefore that only increases those specific beliefs and political ideas. Sadly, this is one of the unfortunate side effects of technology and social media. When we're surrounded by so many other people who share roughly our worldview, then we end up actually shaping our worldview in that direction, which gets magnified and amplified to such a point where we become a more polarized and strong-minded version of our original self. This creates scenarios where people who have different views to our own are often thought of as the enemy, and this can be seen even in modern polls where people are less likely to date or get into a relationship with someone who is on the other side of the political spectrum. Now, there's plenty more that could be said about this whole topic and political divide more generally, but if you're interested, then I definitely recommend reading the book The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, and I may even make future videos that go into some of the psychological underpinnings behind these things. But anyway, if you found this video useful or interesting, then I'd definitely appreciate if you could like and subscribe, or even leave a comment down below with some feedback. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.